having a mindset where you are not driven by fear at work is a privilege of the Gen Z. However, overworked life is an underprivilege of the millennials. I think socioeconomic status, no, it flows in you like blood. The conditions that you've grown up in don't get cut by the startup bug just because the bug is in vogue. If I look at it absolutely from a distance, then no, I would not want to work 70 hours a week.
Do you think that Indian work culture is toxic? दोस्तों आज का जो हमारा टॉपिक है वो बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग है बिकॉज इट इज रेलेवेंट टू जेन जी यंग जनरेशन हु आर एंटरिंग द वर्कफोर्स ऑफ कॉर्पोरेट कल्चर एंड इंडियन स्टार्टअप्स इकोसिस्टम। आज हम डेप्थ में समझेंगे कैसे कॉर्पोरेट कल्चर और इंडियन स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम काम करता है और क्या सही में आपको 70 आवर्स पर वीक काम करना पड़ेगा। हम ये भी समझेंगे कि कैसे जेन जी अपनी रिक्वायरमेंट्स अक्रॉस द टेबल पुट कर रहा है, क्या क्या उनके लिए चैलेंजेस हैं एंड हाउ दे आर चैलेंजिंग द होल ट्रेडिशनल नॉर्म्स ऑफ द कॉर्पोरेट कल्चर। And to help us understand this topic in depth, we have with us Dr. Sakshi Mehrotra, who is a specialist in organization behavior. She is the founder director of Mindlock Psychological Services and is a professor at ILM University, Greater Noida. Dr. Sakshi Mehrotra, welcome to Heal It. Heal It एक ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म है जो इन्फॉर्म, एजुकेट और एम्पावर करता है by disseminating the right information about mental health. मैम आज का टॉपिक या आज का सब्जेक्ट बहुत ही रेलिवेंट है स्पेसिफिकली टू दोज पीपल हु आर अबाउट टू एंटर द कॉर्पोरेट एंड वर्क प्लेसेस, Gen Z and the young brigade of our country. But before we deep dive into this subject, I really want to understand a basic understanding कि एक organization कैसे काम करती है and what are the core pillars of an organization.
Right. So Sagar, thank you for having me. I'm happy that I get this opportunity to speak to your audience on very pertinent issues right now. So just to basically understand, there are few primary pillars on which the organization runs. Knowledge is one pillar, which is basically how transfer of knowledge happens from different spaces of organization. Process is one. So how different processes are run.
Right.
Human resources is one. Then systems is one. Currently, if you look at data being such a big, boom in the last decade, so data processing is technically now a full-fledged separate core area, but all these are interrelated, and any pillar falling, any pillar going weak on any side tends to have an impact on the entire system. So all these systems need to work in good unison and balance for an organization to successfully keep functioning.
Ma'am, you helped me explain the core pillars of an organization. And in fact, I personally believe, and it's just not my personal belief, but everyone knows that these all 4 pillars are run by humans only.
Right.
And now that we are talking in the Indian context, I want to understand कि इंडिया का कॉर्पोरेट कल्चर और स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम कैसा दिखता है आज के टाइम पे, क्या स्टेट है?
See, India opened itself to MNCs in 91. I think, I don't know if you were born back then or not. I was there. So we opened up to the MNC culture, and since then, the shape of the Indian business has really shifted. While we were, predominantly public sector units before that time, now we have seen, we've become a more global workforce. There's a lot of exchange of organizations and employees in and out of India. Parallel to that, with government really trying to push the startup culture in the country, we've seen a lot of startups have, small ones, big ones. They've really tried to generate entrepreneurial spirit in the workforce. So let's say I've worked with universities for a very, very long time now, almost 20 years of my career. And I see that students are not just looking at jobs. They are looking at ventures that they can develop themselves, where their personal ethos, goals, agendas, they match with what they are doing, in the workplace also. So rather than just being a part of a workplace, they're also trying to create workplaces. Right. Now, if I start comparing MNCs with startups, especially in our work scenarios, stability is one thing that I think really comes into the picture. MNCs are backed by a lot of history, They are, old organizations. They've built businesses. There is financial stability of sorts. So, stabilization and destabilization, I think this is what marks a basic difference between startups and
The
already
corporate
established corporate
yes.
houses. So even though, let's say, I think when I look at a young person from a tier 2, tier 3 city who's taken an education loan and whose parents have really pushed the child to study a certain way so that they can get a good corporate job, I see a dream of being a part of a large organization, being a small
Where they can belong.
entity, but belonging to a large organization. However, a lot of times we've also seen that those dreams are also very lofty sometimes. They don't want to be a part of a larger system, they want to create a larger system. So I do not see a very clear cut line when I am looking at the achievement motivation, so to say, of the younger generation, that where they want to be. But MNCs provide, I mean, I can say that on a generic format, they provide more stability when you are in the initial years of your career, when you're just trying to learn how to fly out. But startups have that, they bring out the passion in you and the joy of creating something completely by yourself from scratch and see it grow to new heights.
Right.
So I think it feeds very different needs of a human being. But I kind of like the energy in the new generation. Will they learn from the best and then try and create something better out of it?
Of course. Ma'am.
So I think that's where we are somehow right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now that you have portrayed the whole startup as well as the corporate culture shift in India, like back in 90s that you mentioned that MNC started coming. And I believe as far as my memory goes, after 2000, there was a shift, dynamic shift wherein the aspirations changed.
Right.
That they want to
Right.
open up something on their own. They want to have something of their own.
Correct.
Right. And from there, a lot of people started digging in that what exactly they want to do. Right. So again, that was an amazing shift. But with shift, there comes challenges. So now I want to talk about the challenges that are existing in the corporate as well as the startup ecosystem in India.
See, first challenge is financial stability, I think. Like I said, that corporates are backed by a basic financial safety to them. Because they're larger organizations, there is more funding, there's more money. Startups, even though we've seen a lot of them, I don't want to put names out here, but we've seen a lot of them that started at a very fast pace, achieve the unicorn status. But then the moment the finances start to wriggle away a little, it's a quick fall down. And when it comes to the employees, I think it suddenly brings in a lot of difficulties. Because, again, coming back to stability, the stable ecosystem that an MNC can provide, that is always under question in a startup. But then, I'll also not shy away from challenging what I'm saying right now. We've also seen a lot of layoffs. We've seen a lot of layoffs in the last few years. And the best of the organizations in the world, like the ones that have been top rated,
Google, right?
They have laid off people. So I really don't know where to put a finger that when I say, okay, this is a challenge of this sort of an organization, it's a challenge of that sort of an organization. I think honestly, we are living in times where complete dependence cannot be on systems. We've moved away from those times where people would depend on systems. Let's say, for example, my grandfather was a PNB employee all his life. He retired as a PNB manager, I think these people could give their lives to organizations because they knew that the organizations are there to stay.
There was a sense of security back then.
There was a sense of security.
Why there is a mirrored reality now that, why the whole system is so volatile right now is what I want to understand as well, ma'am.
When the market shifts pace, then everything shifts. I think we are in times where the speed of movement is very, very high in terms of technology, in terms of people's expectations, in terms of what employees need to do to survive, in terms of what organizations need to do to survive, in terms of customer expectations, the deliverables that are expected. I think everything is moving at such a fast pace that it's very hard to predict what will we be seeing 50 years hence.
Right.
Now, when that predictability goes, the market is very volatile.
Exactly. It's very shaky.
It's very shaky at all times, for good and bad both. We are also bearing the fruits of it,
We're also feeling the ripples.
the ripples of it.
Right. Ma'am, one of the aspects of insecurity is money or is associated with money.
Right.
I want to talk about, and you highlighted as well while we were conversing, and I want to talk about the socioeconomic status or socioeconomic aspects, that how it plays a role for the job seekers.
I think socioeconomic status, no, it flows in you like blood. The conditions that you've grown up in, the financial good and bad that you've seen, it really makes a lot of difference to the decision making you'll do. Somebody from tier 2, tier 3 city, I think the pressing need is to start earning. Somebody's taken lakhs of education loan to complete their education. Somebody's must be having aging parents and wants to cover the health costs that might be coming to that person very soon. Someone is very aspirational to build a better life, wants to change the track of the family within one generation, wants to run very fast. We need to understand that when you get into entrepreneurial ventures, the wait time is high. You need to be patient and you need to sit on a lot of efforts before they start bearing fruits. And I don't think everybody has that privilege. So a lot of people would want to get into a good job which starts to stabilize their family system, their financial status, before they choose to kind of, okay, let me take an effort of 1.5, 2 years before this starts to bear financial fruits. So I'm not sure how many of us have that liberty, honestly, to kind of fly high the first day and independently. I'm not saying that doing a job is not flying high. Some of us are brilliantly cut out for a 9 to 6, 9 to 7 job. We do that well. These are structured environments. You have predictability,
Exactly.
you have stability, you have SOPs which are already in place. You just need to follow it completely and deliver your strengths.
Right.
So some of us are brilliant at doing a job. And I always say that there is no, don't get cut by the startup bug just because the bug is in vogue. And there is no shame in just following what is needed to be done. It's good to dream, but it's important to keep your feet on the ground and be in touch with your reality too.
Right.
So, yeah.
Ma'am, as you mentioned that it is important to be in touch with the reality, it is important to be grounded.
Right.
India as a country now, as I'm seeing, and as we all know across the world, we are being credited as being the youngest workforce.
Right.
How do you see that? And because why am I asking this question is because people of young age, they're very jumpy, high on energy, high on adrenaline. Do you think that's the condition with India right now, or is it different?
Yes, we are a very young workforce, but I think that's not just an outcome of the number of younger people we have in workplaces. That's also an outcome of, again, like I said, the sheer number that we are. And when we talk of work, no, I don't think just the youth energy matters, the skill matters. So it's not just enough to be a young workforce. It's important to be a young, skilled workforce.
Right.
However, the deliverables that Indian workforce can, the kind of resilience and energy that we carry at work, I think it's very hard to see.
Very rare.
Very rare. But it comes with its own drawbacks. and we are suffering. Not that we are not suffering because of that. But that's very innate to us. And the organizations know how to tap into that.
Right. But a minute or minuscule level of revolt or jolt is something that we are seeing in the younger generation now. Like if I talk about Gen Z specifically,
Yeah.
they are
Oh, they're very different.
right. Like Gen Z, they have entered the workplaces. Even the generation before that,
Right.
they are entering or about to enter the workplaces. How do you see them? How is Gen Z doing in corporate?
Oh,
or-
they are so different. They're very delightfully different, actually. They bring in a more balanced approach to life. So I'll bring in a little theory here. There's a very famous hierarchy of needs, Maslow's
Yes,
hierarchy of needs, which says that as the lower needs get satisfied, the upper ones get activated. I think the baby boomers,
60, 70.
grandparents, at least my grandparents' age, then Gen X, then us millennials, we all were looking at the lowest hierarchy. Like even I remember while I was growing up, this was at the back of my mind that once I finish my education, I need to start earning. Okay, what do I do when I start earning? Once you have a stable salary, you need to own a house, you need to buy a car, you need to buy health insurance for your parents. So these were absolutely set for us. Not that anybody really pushed it into us, but the times were such. We saw these struggles, and that's what made sense to us. Thankfully, by the time millennials became parents, this lowest hierarchy level seemingly settled. Thankfully, we have homes, or if we don't want to have them. We have basic vehicles, we have basic comforts. We are not living in that dilly-dally of per month. Okay, the month end or the last week of the month is here. Okay, no more spendings to be done. Okay, shut down all expenses. That's gone, hopefully, for at least for the middle and the upper middle class. That bit has gone. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist for people. We are a very diverse economy, so let me not make any blanket statements. However, the new generation has grown up in an environment where they were not struggling probably for end to end on a monthly basis. Parents were slightly more comfortable. They allowed them to
grow and prosper.
Yes. Basic needs met. I'm not talking of luxuries, but basic needs met. So the next one now wants a better life. Now, when they want a better life, they come with that force into the workplace also. They don't want hierarchical workspaces. They'll question the hierarchy. The hierarchy is a previous generation who's seen hierarchies work. Now, that's where the trouble starts.
I think millennials took it with a jolt. Definitely, like they were even not completely contented with it.
Right.
But when it comes to Gen Z or the generation next to them, I think they are revolting in a full-fledged manner.
Correct.
This is something that we are not okay with.
Right.
And they are putting it across the table.
Yeah. They don't buy hierarchies.
Right.
They buy pragmatism. They buy logic.
Right.
Okay, that has to be done. This is why this has to be done.
Right.
Hence,
right.
They buy pragmatism. Their idea of loyalty to workplaces has shifted. Right. They are more loyal to themselves. They are loyal to the system till they are part of the system, but they'll not spend a lifetime with you.
Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
Honestly, I don't think anything is a good or a bad thing. When you look at things in context, till it functions for both the sides, it's good. Once it starts to become problematic or toxic for any sides, it's not good.
Of course.
Then, even though we were talking of insecurities, there are few things they've placed above it. If we are talking of personal hierarchy, they've placed few things above insecurity.
I think this was something that I also wanted to cover. Like, what is something that they're also putting across the table?
I think mental health, their physical health, their pet's health. If they're not feeling good on a day or somebody in the family needs them, they would want to call in for a leave. They are not choked by the fear of a job loss, which I think makes them a little more liberated than the previous generations.
But don't you think that the previous generation has created that stratosphere for them?
Yes. Yes.
So do you think that in a way they're slightly privileged?
See, I'll be honest, Sagar, I think every generation has their own privileges. Right? Let's not say that one generation is more or less privileged. They are differently privileged. So, yes, they are privileged because somebody has laid some sort of a road,
Basic foundation for them.
basic foundation in place. So they are privileged in that way. But they're very underprivileged in terms of a community existence. So let's say if having buzzing work life was a privilege of the millennials or is a privilege of the millennials, having a mindset where you are not driven by fear at work is a privilege of the
Gen Z.
Gen Z. However, overworked life was an underprivilege or is an underprivilege of the millennials. But loneliness is an underprivilege of Gen Z. They are alone, right? Connected to the world, 3 lakh followers, 2 lakh followers,
But
10,000 followers. Nobody to land onto the day you're feeling sad. That wasn't a challenge, at least with my generation.
Right.
I had friends who would appear at the drop of a hat and not question.
Right. What do you think is the reason for it, that why are they lonely? Specifically at workplaces, what is the reason?
I don't think it's just the workplaces. Loneliness is a pandemic now. Why has multiple reasons. First and foremost, breakdown of the family system. Now again, if we are talking across generations, we've gone down from families of 25, 30 to first we came to 10, 12, then we came to 5, 4, now we've come to 2, now we've come to 1.
Yes.
We've broken down. Not without reason. We were growing up differently. Our expectations from life are different. We are less tolerant for people around. I mean, as much as my heart cries when I say this, but our tolerance for another individual has gone down because we want to live life on our terms and conditions. And we're very touchy about it. When I say we, I am including the last of the millennials and the entire new generation, the Gen Z. And I have a kid who's the next generation, and I see it more and more in them. So it's not just coming to the workplace. I think it's probably the culture that has grown in a certain way, and the fact that people do not find themselves with an ability to be able to connect to another person because we've not learned that back homes.
Right. I'm talking of workplace. I really want to understand certain statements that are given by the HRs and the leaders that Gen Z and the younger younger workforces, they don't put it all, right? And as you mentioned, they prioritize a lot of things for themselves, right? HRs definitely mentioned that they switch jobs more often.
Correct.
They change it for the sake of money. But Gen Z, on the other hand, states that it is for the career advancement.
Correct.
Right. So how do you see this whole discrepancy that is existing?
See, I wouldn't say that the statement is absolutely incorrect, but I feel it is incomplete. So yes, they shift jobs. Yes, of course, money is why we are working. It's a large chunk of why we are working. We want to pay our bills. So money becomes an important parameter of judgment when you're doing or when you're applying for a job or when you're taking up a job. And anything better is better. However, Does somebody leave a job only because of money? I don't think so. So HR is a very tricky space to be in. Just because of the nature of work HR employees do. I mean, my heart sometimes goes out to them. It's a very high stress job. But we also need to realize that the expectations of the one who's working in the organization is shifting on a mass level. So when they shift, they don't just shift for money. They shift for the nature of work they do. They shift for the kind of respect they get. They shift for the kind of care an organization takes of them in terms of physical health, mental health, stepping in when they are in an emergency. I mean, we've seen so many times social media buzzing, doing rounds with pictures of brides who are typing on their laptop while they are already dressed up. Or somebody in a pre-operation theater stage and telling someone that how that presentation needs to be run. So let's not shy away from accepting the fact that from top to bottom, everybody in the hierarchy is overstressed, overworked for deliverables, and that stress comes to everyone. And the newer generation probably is not ready to take up so much of it just to earn money.
A particular word has been buzzing in our conversation, which is hierarchy. I really want to talk about it, and how Gen Z sees it, how they perceives it is something that I really want to talk about.
See, hierarchy is something that is ingrained in the Indian culture system. You look at families, hierarchical. There is a grandfather who's the head of the family, then the father takes up the headship. Then the next, elder child. Thankfully now women also, girls also being given those hierarchical positions. Mother has their own hierarchy in decision making. Patriarchy, hierarchy. I think these are so ingrained in us that there is no way they'll not flow into the workspaces, because we are only creating those workspaces. So what we've learned as a part of a social system, we bring to the workplace. And I think the organizations, I'm not talking of the absolute new ones, but I'm talking of the ones that have existed. They're really working hard to learn how to break these hierarchies, because the current generation is not very open to bland hierarchies. Hierarchies that exist because somebody has more work experience or somebody is elder in age. Hierarchies will function on expertise. You know more than me in this area? Okay, you take the lead. I know more in this, let me take the lead. So rotational leadership. Rotating the idea of who leads. I'm not talking of leadership positions, who becomes the assistant manager and who becomes the deputy and who becomes the manager. No. I'm talking of the role of the leader. Who leads in what regard? Everybody, at least in the current generation, has an idea that they can lead in some way. So organizations also need to redesign, recalibrate the work in a way where everybody gets their fair chance of leading where they can lead.
Talking of workplaces, there are leaders who go on to give a statement that, Indians need to work 70 hours per week.
Right.
Do you think it is justified? Like, considering the case that we are underpaid, highly underpaid.
Again, Sagar, I'm coming back to skill. Skill is important at workplaces. And I'm also coming to the statement. He's technically a stalwart in the Indian business fraternity. Gone on to build a big empire, given employment to I don't know how many people, made so many, helped, I'll not say made, but was influential in building so many livelihoods. Let's not just pick something, tiny statement out of context and build on that. 70 hours per week, yes, is a lot of work. Takes away a lot of your time. But I think I would like to add that it's not just how many hours of work you put in, It's how many effective hours you put in. So it's not being in office for 70 hours per week. It's delivering work which is effective and efficient, right? So if I look at it absolutely from a distance, then no, I would not want to work 70 hours a week. However, whatever work I'm putting in, I would want it to be effective. I would not like to drag and procrastinate and let's put it to tomorrow, let's do it day after tomorrow. Let's all put our heads together and then think what we have to do about it. Maybe if we come to a middle ground here, we need to look at the hours. We also need to see how effectively we are delivering in those hours and still leaving some room to enjoy the fruits of the efforts that we put in,
Right.
which is the money that we earn, which is the time that we earn. To have a life where we are also kind of relishing what we are working for and not just working on building more resources and money. And probably by the time we reach the end of our employee's life, we are already in the hospital spending that money on health. So, yes, I think, again, not taking out his statement absolutely out of context, but assuming the essence of it in terms of the effective deliverables that an employee needs to put in. See, we are a developing economy. We can't shun away from it. We are still there. And the kind of economic place we are at, we are in the boom era, but we can't drop out right now. We can't absolutely sit back.
So I think like the statement given by him was taken more in a very derogatory way instead of taking it on a other side or the flip side of it.
And I'm sure people like him must have worked those hours to build empires that they did.
I mean, to be honest, like there were not a lot of exposure back in the day, and you had an opportunity where you could give opportunity to other people, right? I mean, that's a big responsibility in itself as well.
Yeah.
Right, and working diligently for 70 hours per week, wherein you created an empire. I mean, some way it is justified, but then again, you can't expect the same from others who are not doing the same.
But it's an opinion, Sagar. This is, I'm just coming to I'm digressing a little also, and I'm coming to a larger, situation that I see. I also notice in a lot of current trends. One, social media is like you say a word and it's out there
Catches the fire
in
like
seconds.
anything.
And then it starts to generate opinions. All I'm saying is that if we have the right to our opinion, why doesn't that man have a right to his opinion? It was his opinion. He's not saying from tomorrow you will be working 70 hours. I understand that when an influential person says something, it may make a difference.
Right.
It may ripple to changes that might start impacting lives. However, as we say, we are a diverse economy, we are a growing economy, we have a lot of diversity, we keep saying unity in diversity. We are talking of 4 generations in the same office at the same time. We also need to build some tolerance for difference of opinion.
We spoke about that, if a work can be done in 2 hours and I can go back home and chill, right? Why do I need to put in so many hours? Like, we are challenging those norms, and then when these kind of statements brew in, I mean, that definitely slightly, if not to a large extent, definitely impacts.
Right.
But on the other hand, we are also seeing cases of suicides happening. You mentioned loneliness, one of the reasons, but another prominent aspect that has actually boiled up and built up around these scenarios is the work culture.
True.
So, do you think that Indian work culture is toxic?
Again, I would not put a blanket statement to it that Indian work culture is toxic. Workplaces can become toxic. Also, we also don't know how to draw boundaries. Like, boundaries And respecting personal boundaries and creating personal spaces is something we massively fail at. I don't know, you don't know, my boss doesn't know, your boss doesn't know, families don't know. We are struggling, but we are learning. We are learning now. And it's so painful to see young people go like this. So I think workplaces need to be more cognizant of the fact that we've already entered the time zones where mental health is a priority.
Of course.
Outcomes, efficiencies, optimal outputs, financial returns, money, yes, everything is important, but it's not beyond human life. And that cognizance needs to come from the systems, that how much is too much. And every individual is different. I mean, you can have some generic principles, but then some uniqueness needs to come in. You cannot be dealing with everyone with the same rule book. So, okay, you have HR policies, health policies, etc., which are common to all the employees. But if you see someone struggling, how come nobody is noticing that somebody is crumbling under pressure?
I mean, why we are putting it under the carpet?
Under the carpet, yeah. I mean, if someone in your family is running fever, do you leave that individual and start doing whatever you are doing? No, you go check on them. This is where human resource management comes so critically into the picture. People, let's talk of the younger workforce only, because we are talking so extensively about them. They are living away from families. They are
Of
living
course.
alone in big cities.
Yes.
Some of them have never lived in a big city. They are managing their food, they are doing their laundry, they are managing their money, they are trying to send money back home. They are really doing a lot at 24, 25 years of age. Plus, they are alone. Plus, there is social media. Plus, there is a constant comparison of how his or her life looks better than mine. How I may not be doing enough. What do I need to do to make this better? I don't have anybody around. I don't want to trouble my parents by sharing my woes. My workplace doesn't understand me. It's just too much to handle. And let's be honest, we've not grown up in environments where we are very resilient to handle all this. We need support. And it's absolutely all right. It's important that organizations keep an eye. They create systems where mental health of the employee is constantly monitored and taken cognizance of, and some steps be put in. See, end of the day, if someone functions well at a workplace, is happy, your work will be better. A sad, frustrated, anxious employee will not deliver their best. So in the end, even if this sounds very transactional from my mouth, in the end, a good human resource, a fully functioning, well-intending employee is end of the day going to do well for you. So don't do patchwork. Don't do trainings and workshops when your revenue gets collected and you have to finish off that budget that you've allocated to mental health. Make it a continuous practice. Integrate it in your system. We are integrating so many processes, no? AI was not there back then. उसको भी तो अब integrate कर रहे हैं ना? Let's say if we look at baby boomers as employees, they never worked on computers. उनको आपने सिखाया ना how to use hardware, how to use softwares.
Ma'am, one aspect that came into the picture was money, right? Money plays a big role. And people go extra mile to even do moonlighting.
Right.
I want to understand the psychology of moonlighting, and is it right or wrong?
See, I'm not sure if people are dabbling into multiple, let's say financially active job roles only because of finances. A lot of us are in careers that we were not cut out for. So everybody hasn't been lucky and landed in a place which they are naturally, instinctually cut out for. So I think for some people, moonlighting may just be a way of finding more satisfaction in doing something that they really wish to do. And I mean, as an automatic output, it also brings in money. For some of them, it could be money. For some of them, it could also be generating an alternate source of income to see when they can transition from doing something they don't want to do to doing something they want to do. However, currently, ethical questions arise. I'm sure it's also a concern with organizations that would the individual given less of themselves to a place where they are technically, where they've signed up, they're on the job role, and be doing something where there is a conflict of interest or where they are more keen or more interested, would it take away the zeal and passion from the regular job that they are doing? So I think this needs to come more on the desk for a discussion as to how to regulate this entire phenomena of moonlighting and how to bring it to a place where, again, people can do what they wish to do without really undermining their outputs at their own workplaces. But somebody needs to talk of the elephant in the room, and it can't keep slipping under the carpet.
We are reaching a close to this interview, and as I mentioned earlier during the start of the interview that we have a very young generation, and this whole subject, this whole topic today that we are discussing, that we are putting to the table, is prominent in the young generation. Right. So how do we go on to build inclusive workplaces, or as they say, that efficient workplaces wherein employers and employees can actually work towards the betterment and to a more fulfilling way of living as well, I would say.
Right. I think it's very important for organizations and generally people at large to realize that our old systems have crash landed. They are ceasing to be effective as they were previously, and we don't need to get personally insecure because something that was functional till yesterday is not functioning anymore. There are two aspects to life when you hit roadblocks. One is that you start questioning your own selves. That how have I gone wrong, and why did I hit the roadblock? How did this come in my way? Why has my growth stopped? There's another way to understand that roadblocks is always a part of a journey.
Right.
And try and readapt and move over it. And start having more faith in our ability to move over things rather than having the expectation of constancy being maintained across our lifespan. कि सब एक सा रहेगा. मैंने आज ये स्किल सीख लिया, अब मैं हमेशा एफिशिएंट
रेलेवेंट रहूंगा उसके अकॉर्डिंग
या रहूंगा, हमेशा रेलेवेंस रहेगी. I have a certain SOP in place and I will follow it and it will always lead to results. No. You are the SOP. Your ability to readapt, recalibrate, be flexible is the SOP. Keep using that, you'll never be irrelevant. And same is with organizations. So when we are talking of efficiency in organizations, I'll just try and put together what all I have discussed with you today. One, be open to breakdown of hierarchies, which are only based on years. That could be age, that could be experience. break down hierarchy of yours, bring in hierarchy of expertise. Bringing in rotational leadership, like I said, very important. Everybody has something powerful to give to an organization. Utilize your people well. Take care of them. Mental health policies, physical health policies, not just on paper. See that how is it executed to the last employee in your organization.
Right.
Don't just put it on paper. Check on its execution. If you have one counselor in your office, check the utilization. How many people are walking in and utilizing that space? Check the utilization of the resources that you're trying to create. First, create them, then make people use them. Don't just check boxes. Trainings, as much as technical skill building is important, soft skill building, life skills building is equally important.
Right.
At least in current age, we cannot do away with that. Tolerance, I think. Tolerance for differences. Just because the next generation doesn't look like you doesn't mean that they're not good at work. You don't know that somebody with good skill may just do something for you in 2 months that someone who's come with a degree has not been able to do for 2 years.
True.
Give people a chance. You can always generate systems around it. Give people 1 year, give people 6 months. Let them deliver if they're saying they can deliver. Give them chance and spaces. So, I think we really need to rejig the entire system right now. We are sitting on top of the wave. If we do this well, this economy will look different in few years from now. People will look different in few years from now.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. It was lovely having you here. And I hope with this episode, we are in a position to inform, educate, and empower our young audiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.